Bruce Owen, and I am the Vice President of Employee and Community Impact at Equinix. Equinix is the world's digital infrastructure company, and I lead a team called Community and Belonging, which is responsible for diversity, inclusion, belonging, employee well-being, and community impact. Well, I think it starts with just thinking back about times where we felt included and times where we haven't. And it's kind of remembering the type of leaders that made us feel included. So whether that was a teacher or a sports coach or a manager that you've worked for. And if I reflect on that, I think some of those behaviors include accountability. So are we holding people accountable for inclusive behaviors? And that inclusion is not opt-in. And so it's kind of this idea is what actions are we taking against brilliant jerks, the type of people that's like, we know they like that, but they're good at their job. Or are we actually taking action to hold ourselves accountable? The second is probably vulnerability. Watching leaders talk about, real topics, about admitting their weaknesses, about being willing to grow and to demonstrate that they actually don't have it all together. And it's okay. It's okay to lead from a position of not knowing. Thirdly, I'd say empathy, really trusting what your teams are telling you and seeing things through a different set of eyes other than the eyes that we've been born with. Listening, taking the time to truly listen, not just to want to respond, but to hear deeply what someone is trying to say, even though the words may be different. And then an important one in terms of behavior is healthy conflict. Diversity of thought and diversity of experience is actually about injecting difference into an equation, and this results in conflict. And so if you can recognize that conflict is necessary and healthy in order to have greater innovation and greater outcomes, and as long as it's done on a foundation of trust, I think it's a really important behavior to be able to model as a leader. And then lastly, collaboration. Diversity is a really core ingredient to innovation and to business progress. And so being able to lead in a way that is collaborative, where you don't have to always have the answers as the leader, but get to work as part of a collaborative team and help shepherd that along is a really important behavior too. One is be really clear about your why. It's like just starting in it because it's either in vogue or you think it might be the right thing to do is the wrong reason to do it. So be really clear on why, that this is a business imperative, that, if you look at every data point that demonstrates that it leads to greater innovation, it leads to greater agility, it leads to higher performance, and it leads to, exceeding financial targets. And that's just demonstrated, but you really have to be crisp on why you're doing it. The second is this position of acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know. So many people kind of start thinking like, well, I know what I need to do. And the reality is you don't. And so spend time listening, really listen to employees, get outside help. And maybe the next one is, it's cliched for good reason, is that unless the CEO is really buying in and it's their business priority, it's going to fail. It will be lip service. And you can see really quickly if a CEO of an organization is committed to this and sees it as a business imperative and ingrains it and embeds it in all aspects of the business. And so I think that without a why, without acknowledgement that you don't have the answers, and without a CEO that is really committed, you're going to fail. And then I would say next is make sure that people in majority groups take active roles in leading too, in co-leading. So often what you see happen is that organizations leave change to those that have been historically underrepresented. And unless there's co-ownership that says, hey, those of us that are from, I am a straight white man, unless those of us in positions of influence that come from majority groups are co-leading change, it is unfair and unreasonable to leave the burden of change on those that are those from minority groups. It just doesn't make any sense. And then maybe the last point is to establish a set of guiding principles right up front about how you want to embark on this. And so for us at Equinix, some examples would be, one, we commit to sustained and measurable change. We don't want to be in a spot where we're just ticking the box and doing activities. We want to make sure that every change we make is sustained and it's measurable. Secondly, we have a principle that says we're going to do the work before we talk about it. And so we are going to do the hard work. Third, that we're going to be real authentic about it. We're going to put ourselves out there and take risk. And with that comes some degree of failure and a real honesty about where we're at. Next one, I'd say actively engage with your colleagues. And so listen, take time to get input. I think when organizations try to do this from the top down, it fails. I think you have to go top down and bottoms up and really create an environment where everybody has an equal voice in shaping what the culture of the organization would look like. And then the last guiding principle for us was really around transparency, about being transparent about where we're at on the journey, not being ashamed to say we got a long way to go. It's not like we've arrived, and never pretending that we've arrived, but being able to demonstrate this sustained and measurable progress. And I think if you kind of tick through it in that order, it's easier to get going, because most organizations look at it and want to start with something like, I'm going to do unconscious bias training, or I'm going to just talk about it in the company meeting. And I think all of those things are more outputs as opposed to a strategy that leads to cultural change.